Hey guys. Okay, so this is how we have to do the lesson right now while I'm out. I'm just gonna record it and kind of go through the notes with you. So just do your best to follow along, and I will do my best to not be so shaky while recording. So first off, we are learning about reflections. So this is the next type of transformation that you're gonna be learning for this chapter. The chapter again is called Transformations, and there are different types of transformations, different types of changes that happen on a graph. The first one we learned about is a translation, which you should remember is a slide. And now what we're going to learn is a reflection or a flip. Circle that word flip. Is a transformation in which a figure is reflected in a line called the line of reflection. So there's going to be a line that this figure or shape kind of flips across and will kind of make it look the opposite of what it currently does. And opposite is a really key word that we're going to hear a lot in this lesson, so just keep that in mind. A reflection creates a mirror image of the original figure. Okay, remember the image is the new one, the figure is the original one or the old one. So if you look over here, we've got this one right here, this shape is going to be reflected across this line. So when we do that, I want you to think about like your hand, okay? Here's your hand on that line, and when you reflect it, it flips across to the other side, okay? So it goes from here to the other side. Now it could go from this side back to this side, but that's a reflection. It's a mirror image. Okay, if you look at my hand, I know you just want to look at my hand. Okay, right now my thumb is on the left side, right? But when I reflect it, it's on the opposite side. So think about that word, opposite, okay? It's becoming the opposite of what it was. So that's what's going on in a reflection. It flips. Okay, then we look right here in example 1. All it's asking you is to tell whether the blue figure, obviously it's not blue here, this one's the blue one, this one's the red one, is a reflection of the red. When it says that, the red one is the original one, okay, and the blue one is the new one. So it's asking you, did this one flip across this line to get to here? Okay, the answer for this one is yes. You can compare all of the points and just see, did it kind of become the opposite? So this point initially was really close to the line. So when it flips, it still should be really close to the line, just on the opposite side. Okay, and the same thing's gonna happen with all the other points. This one was a little bit further away. So when it flips, it should still be a little bit further away on the opposite side, okay? So this one's yes. Then if we look at this one, okay, this one's asking, is it a reflection? Okay, right now you could look at this as kind of like a, I don't know, like a Pac-Man mouth. Okay, it's pointed this direction. So if it reflected, it should be pointing this direction on this side, and it's not. So this one is no. You could take this a step further and tell me what this is, because this is a movement that we've already learned about. This one is a translation. So you could say that this is a translation. It's a slide, right? Not a flip. Okay, so you take a second to go ahead and answer those on your own. Pause if you need to. Okay, the first one is a no. You don't necessarily need to pay huge attention to which one is the red and which one is the blue, but this one's red, this one's blue, this one's red, this one's blue. Okay, tell whether the blue is a reflection of the red. So we're starting with red, going to blue. This one just slid, right? This is a translation. So that one's a no. This one here, even though the line is a different way, you could still look at this as like if it was your hand. Okay, first your hand's facing this way, now it's facing this way. The smaller side of this trapezoid was up here, right? Further away from the line, and it's further away from the line on this side. It's become the opposite. So this one is a yes. Hope that makes sense to you. All right, let's talk about the key idea, the rule for reflecting. When you're translating, there's a lot of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing that's happening in order to slide it left to right or up or down. Here, remember a minute ago I mentioned to you that the word opposite is a key word because things are just going to become the opposite of what they were, okay? Up here before I told you this was really close to the line, right? So think of this as being below the line as in like a negative number, and this being a positive number. They're just going to be opposites of one another if it's a reflection, okay? So that's what this is kind of going to get into, okay? First, let's read the words. To reflect a figure in the x-axis, might be helpful to draw that like left, right, so that you know the x-axis. You're going to take the opposite, so I want you to write this down, the opposite of the y coordinate, okay? If we're going to reflect across this line, okay, it's going to move up or down, right? Across that line, the only way it can move is up or down. And in that case, it's the y coordinate that's changing, but it's going to be the opposite of what it was. If we're going to reflect a figure across the y-axis, so this axis, okay, it can only move left or right. So in this case, we're going to take the opposite of the x coordinate. Since it's only able to flip left or right across that y-axis, it's the x coordinate that becomes the opposite, okay? Here's the algebra, here's the rule. I need more like be able to hold the paper. Okay, star this, circle it, you need to know these, okay? Sorry for being so shaky. A reflection in the x-axis, okay, or across the x-axis, I like that word a little bit better. I guess right here I should have drawn up and down. Reflection across the x-axis, the rule looks like this. We take that point, x, y, okay? X stays the same, but now you see this minus sign here. I need you to read this as xy becomes x opposite y. Okay, read that in your head with me a couple times. Xy becomes x opposite y. One more time. Xy becomes x opposite y. I need you to not read that as negative because it's not. If that point is initially a negative value, it doesn't stay negative, it becomes the opposite of what it was, okay? So opposite, opposite, opposite. Same idea for a reflection across the y-axis. So across the y-axis, okay, this is read as xy becomes opposite x and then y. Xy becomes opposite x, then y. So we're going to look at these few points over here, okay? The initial figure is right here, okay? So you could write old if you want to, okay? Then something that we haven't really talked about right here. If you look at these points, we have one little mark, apostrophe next to it. This is the first new one, okay? But when they show that they've done something else to that figure, they're gonna put 2 marks after it, okay? So this is also a new one, but it's like the second new one, okay? If you look at this one only, we're gonna ignore this side for right now. This one is showing you a reflection across which axis? It went from here to here. It jumped across this line, which means it was a reflection across the x-axis, okay? So if we look at that rule, xy becomes x opposite y. Let's focus on the y coordinates of these points, okay? Let's take a look at point A for just a second. A originally, okay, is -3, 1. Well, this rule tells me that if I'm going to change it and reflect it across the x-axis, I need the opposite of y. Remember that this is x, this is y. So the opposite of this is -1, right? So this new point, that A prime, should be -3, -1. The opposite of a positive 1 is a -1. So then if you look here, -3, -1, here's our A prime, okay? That's all that happened there. They just took the opposite of the y value, okay? Again, it's the opposite of the y because we're moving up or down. So the only thing that should change in this case is the y value because it's going up and down, okay? You could do the same thing with the b, okay? This point is -4, 4. So the 4 is the one that needs to change. Well, the opposite of a +4 is a -4. So we see that this point is down here at -4. And then the same idea with c. This point is -1, 1. Well, the opposite of that is -1, -1, okay? +1, -1. Do you see how those points are still kind of the same position away from the line, but on the opposite side? That's what a reflection is, okay? Now if we focus on just the top part, okay, we see that the old one went to the right, and when it goes that direction, it's going across the y-axis, okay? Moving across the y-axis, but when it's jumping across the y, the directions that it's going are left and right, okay? So what's changing when we move left or right is x. So we look at this rule, xy becomes opposite x, y, okay? So ignore the point in the middle for a second. We're gonna look at this a double prime, okay? -3, 1, we need to change based on this rule, okay? When we reflect it, we take the opposite of x. So the opposite of x is +3, okay? So that new point there is 3, 1. We come over here and we take a look, 3, 1. So we got -3, 1, +3, 1. Okay, that's the change there depending on which axis we're going on. So I'm gonna stop harping on that for a second and move on to some examples so that you can get a try. On these few examples, they come from IXL, so it's just one point that we're gonna move, okay? Reflect the point, identify which axis you are reflecting over, draw an arrow towards that direction, okay? That's a really helpful tool so you know you end up where you're supposed to, okay? So let's look at this first example. Graph the image is the new one. Graph the new point of 6, 6 after a reflection over the x-axis. So here I think it's really helpful. You could use a highlighter or marker or even just your pencil, kind of bolden the axis that you're going over. So in this case, here's the x-axis. That point has to go over that line, okay? Which means if we're going over this line, we've got to go this direction, okay? If it's moving down, I want you to think about which axis that's on. If we're going down, we're on the y-axis. So that means the y value of this point needs to change or become the opposite. The rule here, you could flip back if you need to, xy becomes x opposite y, okay? So if you need to flip back, you can look at that rule, but you're gonna have to know these, okay? You will have to know this rule. If we're going down, that's on the y-axis, okay? So only y is changing. X is gonna stay the same. All right, so if this point is 6, 6, I'm gonna change that. 6, 6 will become 6, -6, okay? Opposite, remember, the opposite of this would be -6. And then we plot that new point. Start here, right 6, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Label this as D prime, okay? When you are reflecting, you can always check that the points need to be the same distance from the line they jumped across, just on the opposite side. So this point here was 6 above the line, okay? And the new point is 6 below the line, okay? So it's been reflected across that line. I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's look at the next one. We have the point 5, 8, and it wants us to graph the image, the new one, after a reflection over the y-axis. So again, take your highlighter or just your pencil and kind of bolden that line. Whoops. That was a really bad line, okay? And then we're gonna reflect it. So if it's going over the y-axis, that means it needs to go this direction. Somewhere over here is where it's gonna end up, okay? Now we're gonna take that new point or that original point, actually, let's write the rule. XY, if we are reflecting over the y-axis, it's moving left or right, right? Along the x-axis. So x is going to change. It's going to be xy becomes opposite x, y. Okay, again, you could flip back to the previous page and just find that rule, whether you're going over the x or the y-axis, okay? Across the y-axis is opposite x. Remember to read it that way, opposite. So we have our point. 5, 8 has to turn into the opposite of x, which in this case is 5. So the opposite of 5 is -5. And then the y, or the 8, stays the same. So we can go graph this point, start here in the center, go left to -5, and then up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here's our new point, okay? It should look like it's about the same distance from the line, but on the opposite side of it, okay? So this one was 5 to the right, and then it became 5 to the left, okay? All right, let's do 2 more. All right, so this one, the point 0, 2 is reflected over the x-axis. Okay, what are the coordinates of the resulting point, or the new point? So same idea, okay, let's highlight that axis. Here's our x-axis. Here's our point, okay? And it needs to be reflected over that line. So this point right here is at 0, 2, 0, 2. We need to reflect it. Okay, let's write the rule. XY becomes, now when we're going across the x-axis, we're moving along that y one, right, up and down. So that's the y that's going to change. So this becomes x opposite y. Okay, then we can write down our original point, 0, 2. Okay, becomes, x stays the same as 0, but the opposite of this is -2. So 0, +2 turns into 0, -2. You can graph that new point or fill it in over here, 0, -2. Okay, one more. Okay, -6, 6 is reflected over the y-axis. What are the coordinates of the resulting point? So here's our y-axis. We got to go across that line. Okay, across that line is somewhere over here. We need to write the rule. So xy becomes, now when we're going across the y-axis, we're moving left or right. Okay, that means it's the x that's actually changing. So opposite x and then y. Okay, here's our point, -6, 6. So we're gonna write that down. -6, 6, sorry, equals or becomes opposite of x. The opposite of a -6 is a +6. And then the y stays the same as 6. So we're gonna go right to 6 and up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and plot that point. And we will label it P prime. Did we do that over there? We didn't label that one. S prime. All right, any questions on this? Maybe write it down on this page and send me an email. You can try to ask the sub and see if she's able to help you. We're gonna flip to the next page though. We are gonna try to get through a little bit more. Okay, there's just a few more examples left. All right, so now instead of just reflecting one point, we're gonna do multiple. This is kind of like what you saw on the translations homework, where there were a few points and then you had to move all of them. Same idea here, okay? The vertices, that's just a fancy term for points. The points of a triangle are 1, 1, 1, 4, 3, 4. Draw the figure, that's the original one, and its reflection, okay, or the image. And then this one is specific across the x-axis and the y-axis, okay? So we're gonna use this one right here, the first one, as the x-axis flip, and then we're gonna use this one as the y-axis flip, okay? So we're gonna start by graphing these 3 points. 1, 1, start here, right 1, up 1. Okay, then we've got 1, 4, and the last one is 3, 4. So here's our original. Maybe take a second to graph it in both. 1, 1, 1, 4, and 3, 4. Okay, we're going to be taking this and reflecting them over different axes. That's the plural term, okay? First one is the x-axis. So over here, I want you to highlight or just bold that x-axis because this needs to go across that line. So if it's going across this line, that means it's going to go this direction and flip this way. Okay, we've got to figure out what the rule is and what the new points are. It says, what are the new coordinates? It also says draw the figure and its reflection. Okay, so a couple different things happening here. First, let's write the rule, okay? X, Y becomes, now if we're going across the X axis, we're moving downward, okay, and down we go, that's the Y that's changing. So X opposite Y, okay? So we can look at these points and apply the rule, okay? Here's X. Might be helpful to write like X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. That way you know which is which. So if Y is becoming the opposite, that's this one. So the opposite of this is 1, negative 1, okay? We're gonna graph it. 1, negative 1. We're gonna label it A prime. And then over here, A prime, we're gonna write the new one. 1, negative 1. We're gonna do the same thing with B. B is 1, 4. The rule is X opposite Y. So X opposite Y, the opposite of a positive 4 is a negative 4. So this new point should be 1, negative 4, okay? B should be 1, negative 4. And then we can graph it. 1, negative 4. Label it B prime. And the last one is point C, okay? We were told that point C is 3, 4. If the rule is X opposite Y, we've got X, and the opposite of Y would be negative 4. So 3, negative 4. C prime is going to be 3, negative 4. And then we graph it. 3, negative 4. And that is C prime. Okay, so do you see how this one here is a reflection of this one here? It's just been flipped along this axis, okay? So we applied the rule, we got the new points, and we graphed both of them. So we're gonna do the same thing right here, and then I will go through the next one. I just don't know how much time at this point you'll have left in class. So, all right, same points as the last time, but now we're going across the y-axis. If you need to flip back and look at the point, you can, okay? I'm going to highlight the y-axis. Here's the y. These points need to go across that line, okay? So we're going this direction. We need to end up over here somewhere, right, when it flips. Okay, the rule, x, y, becomes, if we're going this way to the left, left means we're only going along this axis, right, moving on these numbers. So it's the opposite of x that we will need for our points, okay? X, y becomes opposite x, y. So we're gonna look at these points. X, y should become opposite x, y. The opposite of this is a negative 1, y stays the same. So our A point should be -1, 1. Okay, and then we can graph it. -1, 1. That's A prime. We're going to do the same thing with B. So B, we have 1 is 1, 4. Okay, we're going to change that point based on the rule. Opposite x, y. So opposite of x is a -1. Y stays the same, -1, 4. So B is -1, 4. Okay, we'll graph it. -1, 4, B prime. Then we have one more point, is C, which is 3, 4. Okay, the rule is opposite x, y. So opposite of x is going to be a -3 and then 4. So let's write it down. C prime, -3, 4. And then we can graph it. -3, 4. Okay, and there we go. So there's the reflected version, right? Started from here, went to there. Doesn't it look like it's just been flipped over that line? Hopefully. Okay, so then here you would do the same thing. You're gonna plot the points, okay? And then reflect it over the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay, for the sake of time of this video, I'll post the answer key to this, but I do want you to fill this part out. The key idea, when we're reflecting points, the image points are the, fill this in, same distance from the axis, just on the opposite side. So one of the things that you should notice about every single one of these, okay? This point initially was 1 above the axis line. It became 1 below. This point here was 4 above the axis line, and when we reflected it, it was 4 below, okay? Same idea here. This one was 1 to the right, then it became 1 to the left, okay? This one was 3 to the right, then it became 3 to the left. That's what this key idea is. Everything about a reflection is the opposite x, the opposite y, the opposite side of the line, but the same distance from it, okay? Everything is the opposite. I believe after today, you don't have homework outside of class, but then you will be doing the homework in class tomorrow. So do your best to have this all filled in. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. But at this point, if you want to try to get a head start on the homework, you can, because you have the homework packet. And then if not, you can just hang out. All right, email me if you have questions.